Hello, it's Joey and today I'm doing a collage spread in my Alter Book junk journal. It's a special page for December sharing a few new festive ideas. So I'll paint a bauble, add some bling and do some collage over here. And it's all really easy, so I'm hoping you'll play along too. And if you do like playing with paper and you love a bit of collage, then hit the subscribe button below, get comfy and let's have some fun. The first thing I'm going to do is create this little image, and I've had a go at making one up and I just want to show you how I did it. It's a bauble made with an old book page that I've painted and then decorated, so you can use any of your paints and decorating materials, and I've just made it hang in a rather whimsical way from a branch of a Christmas tree. So I'll show you how to make the bauble and then we'll very quickly and easily paint this little bit of background, and that will be our image on the left hand side, and then what I'm going to do is a bit of collage over here. So I need to begin with a piece of old book page, and I've punched a few out and had a lot of fun just painting them up. So I'll do 2 or 3 today. But at first I wanted to talk about the type of paper that is good to use for this. So I have been using an old book page from the coffee table book that I used in my junk journal last week. So in my last video I made, this was the 3rd part of a series, I made this up, I decorated it, and the middle page of it is a really big page from a coffee table book, and at the front of that book was a beautiful, relatively thick piece of matte old paper, and it has quite strong font in it, so it's bold and that becomes a feature of the bauble. But use any piece of paper that you like. You could use plain paper, painting paper, but I chose to use this. You just want it to have a little bit of thickness, some substance, because we are going to get the paper relatively wet. We're going to get the paint to just blend and merge and give us a little bit of depth, and we're going to have a bit of fun creating that painting effect. So the first thing you want to do when you've chosen your paper is either punch or cut out a circle. I happen to have a large one that I acquired second-hand off eBay. I buy quite a lot of stuff off eBay. It's one way I manage my budget, if I'm honest. And when I punch these out, I do look for interesting text appearing on the bauble, because that is definitely a feature that I enjoy. So if I punch one out there, I'm really happy to have a variety of text, and the text is quite large font. So have a little rummage through your old books, your book pages, any of the ones that you've pulled out, and just see what interesting paper you've got that might be part of that bauble feature. And when you've got a few of these, you might want to do a few at a time. You want a piece of paper to put them on, because we're going to get a bit sploshy and have a bit of fun, and then we're going to cover them with a relatively dilute watercolour few shades. So let's have a go at that. So let's lay these out on a different sheet of paper so it's easier for you to see on the background. And the first thing I'm going to do is wet them quite a lot, and even more than perhaps you think you should. The paints I'm using in a minute are my Arteza watercolour palette, well used as you can see, quite mucky. We've clearly had a lot of fun with these, and I'm definitely going to have more fun with them in 2021, because colour and learning how to use these is going to be part of my 2021 plan. I'm just gearing up with some more ideas for how to have more fun, still making life easy in 2021. More of that to come on New Year's Eve. So the first thing I will do is, and maybe I should just wet some of these, get them going. I've seen other artists do that on YouTube and it feels like it's a good thing to do. So let's just wet some of the purples and blues down here, and I don't know why I wet the greens. I'm not using them yet. I will use them later to do the branch. Plenty of water on those. And I'm going to come back to my circles. They are the right size at 7.5 centimetre diameter, so all the way across that is about 3 inches, and that size works for me because when I come to put it on another piece of paper and make my little decorative image, that in its entirety is the right size-ish for my own altered book. So depending on the size of your altered book junk journal, perhaps the image and then the bauble could be something a different size. You might even want to put a cluster of these together and really bring it to life. This is a relatively small book, so the 3-inch bauble is going to be absolutely plenty, and then I'll do a little bit of collaging on the right over here. So let's wet our baubles with a goodly amount of H2O. 1, 2, 3. In fact, I think doing 3 at once is possibly easier than doing 1 because it forces you to give a bit of time for that water to sink in. And there's nothing clever about what I'm going to do. I'm going to let the paint do the work. I want a little bit of depth of colour and pigment around the outside, and I want less in the middle. And this is what helps me have a sense of 3D of the bauble, it being more of a globe than something flat. So I'm going to pick up colour and add it to the outside, being a bit more, a bit darker, deeper pigment and darker colours, both of those, as we start to put colour on. And I'm just going to work up a slightly paler blue and let my brush very gently touch that paper. I'm using my left hand to try and keep it relatively flat. It is curling up a little bit. And let the pigment run in. Let that pigment just disperse. So I'm picking up 2 or 3 different colours. Sometimes I'm mixing them on my brush, just letting them mix there, and dibbing and dabbing, not putting my brush flat, and I'm not using a big stroke of the brush. The size of the brush helps because you can pick up quite a lot of liquid, and I'm resisting the temptation to fill in the gap in the middle. Maybe I'll go for a slightly darker blue over here. I'm going to add a bit more of that colour to the outside. And I think this has got some similarity to moons that I've seen. I've seen Helen Colebrook do one, I think, in her journal. That was really fun to watch. She's very good with paint, and if you like seeing anybody play with paint in a journal, go and check out Helen Colebrook's channel, and I'll leave a link to her channel in the description box to this video, so that's good fun. At this stage I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of red and allow that just to settle in the middle, the tiniest bit. And I like this blend of maximum 3 colours, keeping it pale, keeping it light touch in the middle. Ironically, Middle England are my words. Tiny bit more, and I can see the water pushing on the pigment and pushing it out. So if you do have too much colour, add a bit more water and then let that just disperse. So there's one. So far I'm okay with that. I might add a little bit more in a minute, but I'm going to let that settle and dry, and then I'll move on to doing another one. Maybe we'll have a bit more of this darker one in the corner to begin with, making sure that I've got plenty of water on my brush. Now, am I using any skill whatsoever? I'm not sure I am. Does it matter? No. Could we all do this? Definitely. Teeny tiny bit of this red in the middle. Very light-handed, just add a bit more pigment on the outside. And this is why doing 3 at a time is quite useful, because I have waited a little bit for this one to settle, but it's okay to go back. And every time when I've got more pigment on my brush, I start around the outside and maybe just add a little bit more water and let that filter to the middle. And what we'll end up with is something with gradations of colour, hopefully something that's a little bit varied and you can still distinguish the individual shades of blue and purple on this one. And then one more over here. Let's just have a go at the third one. That's all we need to do. Just need to set them aside and let them dry, or if you're slightly more impatient, you can get your heat gun out and dry them off. So I have 3 here that I've painted earlier, and on a couple of them what I had a go at was adding a little bit of a shimmer. So there is a little bit of mica spray on a couple of these, which I do think adds something. I'll show you the spray. It needs filling up. It's just an old cosmetic bottle with a couple of very small spoons of mica powder in and water. So all I've done is put that in a cardboard box, spray about 4 times and let it dry, and then I've sprayed it again. So I just get a little bit more of that shimmer on it. And I really like that on a bauble, but it's not necessary. It doesn't really detract if you don't have it. Do whatever works for you, and whatever supplies you've got, make the most of those. What I want to do is move on to the blingy decoration. And I really wanted to add texture. I really wanted something which, when we have that image on the page, is something that your eye goes to, that you want to feel. And this was, I guess, somewhat inspired by the Christmas tree I've just put up downstairs. So I've added a lot of red baubles. The room I have that in has quite a lot of texture. I have tartan rugs, I have a grey sofa and a lovely log fire on in an evening. And the warmth and texture I just wanted to bring into this design. So the first thing I'm going to do before I add more pen work on this, these dashes of white, is a couple of rows of sewing. Now you could add this with a black pen, you could add it with a stamp, or you could just add a couple of arced rows of zigzag, and they, as you can see, don't need to be the absolute perfect piece of sewing. So what we do to get our little bits of sewing and zigzag decoration to begin with is add a pencil mark in a couple of places, and to get that sense of rotund, the bauble shape that we see, I would suggest giving yourself a bit of a guide by way of a pencil mark on the bauble. So all I'm doing is adding a couple of arced lines, so the sense is that we're looking down onto the bauble and we can see its little fat tummy coming round. And I find that if I do this, then when I come to do the sewing, it's really easy to just follow the line. When you get this little item under the sewing machine needle, if you don't have a pencil mark, it's just that little bit harder to be clear when you want to make it into a bit of a bend under the needle. So I've drawn a couple of pencil lines, and I'm just going to set up my sewing machine and do a couple of zigzag lines, and then we'll add a tiny bit more decoration, and you can just go wild and add whatever decoration you like. So I've set up my sewing machine. It's a Hobbycraft MIDI. I've used it quite a few times now on my channel, and I'm just going to put a zigzag stitch on the bauble. So I've set it to number 4, which is a medium-sized zigzag, and I'm using a relatively thick thread in it. It's actually a warm wine colour, a burgundy colour, which tones quite well and shows itself against the old book page that we've now painted. And as I place the foot down, I'm not pointing, let's show you on this one, I'm not pointing the foot straight across. Remember, we're going to try to do a little bit of an arc, and I don't think it matters if you do reverse first and then forward. Whatever works for you. I think I will just go forwards. A little bit of reverse at the end, and there we are. So as easy as that, we've got a little bit of a bend, and I'm just going to do another row slightly underneath. So I'm going to add a few little marks of white, which I think really make it pop. So I'll run a row of ovoids between the sewed decorative lines that we've created, and I'm just going to add a few other bits and bobs and some dashes to give it that sense of reflection. The pen that I'm using here is an Arteza acrylic marker, so we've got acrylic paint in a marker. You could obviously use a white gel pen, or you could just use some white paint. So I'm just going to add a little bit of depth of white, and I think they need a bit of definition. I think I'll just use a grey twine marker, maybe one end, so just a pen to go around that. I don't know that that's coming out very well. Let's try the other end. That's better. That's better. So it's starting to get there. I think I need a few more lines, bent lines on it. I've got a gel pen in gold. I think the gold works really well with the purple and blue. So let's just have a few more lines, a bit more definition. Really just whatever comes to mind. I think I'll add a bit of definition around the edge of this, just with a black pen. And I like for a bauble like this just to have that scribbly effect. Work my way round. Just need a bit more white to give that sense of reflection, so I think I'm going to use a chalk marker and just add a few marks, nothing too much, a little bit down there. These seem to soak in, so I'm going back over a few little scratchy lines. That's all I need. That gives me enough to use in an image, so I think what we'll do is create the background and then finish the collage. So for the background what we need is a rectangular piece of paper, and the paper that I'm choosing to use today is from this watercolour pad. It says it's ideal for watercolour techniques and mixed media, so that's super. It is 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches. I'm going to cut it down. In fact, this is what's left from a single piece. It's quite thick and it's got a bit of texture, and all I want to do is make sure that it's the right size from a page. That feels a bit wide. I think I'm going to take it down to something just a bit narrower. So I'm going to take a little piece off, but the height I think seems to work. And the first thing I want to do is draw a branch and then paint a few Christmassy tree leaves so that we can dangle our bauble from it. Let's take this off. Bit of corner rounding straight away. And equally, I also want to, at this stage, add a bit of texture on the background. So let's be brave and spray on the table. And I'll just dry that off. And I think we're good to go. So I'm going to take my pencil and draw the branch of that tree, and I want a bit of an arc so we can see not straight across, and also finishing about a third of the way down, so I've got plenty of space here to position the bauble. So just have an arc down to about there. That looks good. And I'm going back in with my watercolour paints, and for this I'm going to use a finer tipped brush. So back in with my water, I'm mixing some greens, and I've got a gorgeous, relatively natural, deep olivey green and I'm going to use another one over here, settle that down, and in one of them I'm going to bring it down with a bit of purple, and in the other I'm going to bring it down with a bit of red. And all credit to Shader Campbell for talking through how these colour mixes work. Maybe need a bit more green in that one. There we go. And what I'm getting is an even more Christmassy vibe of deep greens. So I'm going to start with quite a dry brush. I don't want to go in loaded with paint. I want the effect to come from the brush. Taking my brush and starting at the top, I'm just going to flick out. Sometimes those flicks are a bit longer, sometimes they're shorter, and I'm just working down the branch, adding a bit more pigment, a bit more colour as I go. But it's really good when the brush is almost dry and you feel like you're actually almost out of colour, because it's then when you get that sense of texture. The needles, there's the word I was hunting for. Those needles start to be more visible. I've got different lengths, I'm not pressing hard, I'm just working down, and I'm leaning a little bit towards the end, so I'm letting an arc appear, and I'm going to turn it round and just start at the top and work down and do the same again. Maybe holding it here, let's just work down again. You can see my brush is really quite dry, and it doesn't take any time at all. And if I go back in and add a bit more colour to the green I've already mixed, then I get a slightly different shade, and that's good because I want a bit of variety. Keep your hand light, working down, don't fill in all the gaps, just keep adding a little bit more of a layer. Looking good. And then what Shader says is go in with a light watery mix, so the second colour of this one I had green and a little bit of red, so a bit more green to that. I'm just going to take that and then add a tiny bit more, and it's very, very pale, very light this. So although you're touching on those white spaces that were left by the previous flicks, we're not entirely filling those in with colour. So you get that sense of thickness of needles on your branch, but it's not just one stroke of colour. And that's all we need to do for the needles. What I want to do is add just a little bit of brown, being the branch itself. So I've got a relatively dark brown. The paint isn't dry yet, I'm not worried. I've got my hand flat on the paper just to help. I really like that brown, it's quite natural. I'm going to add a tiny bit of water and just blend that a bit, so it's not quite so harsh at the edges. And isn't this an easy and relaxing way to spend a little bit of time in your craft room? I want to add the bauble, and when it's stuck on I will then colour in a little bit of bauble top and add a whimsical hanging line. Just add a top to the bauble, just a bit of a conical shape. And I think what I will do is colour that in with a bit of water and just blend that a bit. So what I like about these metallic gel pens, and again I'll leave a link in the description box below, what I like is they do blend quite easily. I'm going to use the darker bronze just to give it a bit more colour and emphasis. And then I'm going to be brave and just add a bit of a whimsical line to hang it. And this is the image I'm going to use on the left hand side of the page of the altered book. That will go there, and I'll do a bit of collage on the right. And on the right hand side here, I just want to add a few little bits and pieces. So I've pulled out just a few things that seem to resonate and go with the texture and the fern style of greenery that we have on the page. I've got a couple of little labels from Tracy Fox's recent Christmas collection. I've got a cute little piece of ephemera here, a mini envelope that I've made from a dictionary page. So let's just see what we can do with these. I thought this could go on here, ready to flip, but I didn't want this to merge into the background too much because obviously we have book page behind. I feel that might work well on top of there. Let's just glue that on. I mentioned New Year, and without giving too many names away, or in fact any names at all, I am organising a collaboration with 6 other relatively large YouTubers, and we're going to have a lot of fun sharing all of the projects that bring us joy. So as we embark on 2021, we're going to have a positive attitude to really getting the most out of our junk journaling and sharing that positive vibe. So I do hope you'll join me on New Year's Eve when I'll be sharing my video, and I do hope that you'll be joining those other YouTubers who are sharing their projects and a little bit about our plans and ideas for 2021, so that you can have a vision and a roadmap of what's ahead, and really enjoy picking and choosing what works for you, picking those videos that really inspire you, and having fun in 2021. So I'll tell you more about that in forthcoming videos, and I'll put some details on my community page on my YouTube channel. So if you hit the subscribe button, you'll get those details. Just a little envelope there as a flip out with a bit of very pretty ephemera on the front. And I think maybe on here I'm just going to add one of my favourite stamps at the moment. Maybe in oregano, as we say. Let's have just a little bit of extraness. I want some angles. Yes, right. Happy, happy. I'm going to have a couple of these down here. Yep, because I can still see those peeping out, so that works for me. And when I collaged this piece on down here, I obviously had remembered to leave a little bit of a gap at the edge of glue, so I hadn't put glue on all the way to the edge, which allows me to do that layering. That collage technique, leaving pieces not quite glued down, is what we were using in the cover of that junk journal I made. So really easy to put together some effective collage by using that technique. I'll leave a link to the videos making that collage cover in the description box down below as well if you fancy having a go with a really easy collage. Let's have that showing. That can go on there. And I think all it remains to do is maybe put a message on the page. this is my December spread with collage in my altered book junk journal. I hope that you've really enjoyed this, and I wanted to say thank you for all of your support that you've given me this year. Hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more in 2021, and give me a thumbs up because that really does help. I hope to see you soon.